Hello everybody and welcome. This is the RJND Group's presentation about enterprise architecture and specifically at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. This is presented by Ryan O'Grady, Jennifer Ruberts, Notoya Russell, and Deidra Thornton. The overview for today is comprised of 5 objectives. The first is we are going to define what enterprise architecture is. We're going to talk about the necessary conditions. We're going to talk about the HHS strategic goals and architecture. We're going to talk about the challenges of EA. And we're going to talk about the IR strategy for EA at HHS. First, let's talk about what enterprise architecture is. Enterprise architecture specifies how technologies across an enterprise support the business functions of the enterprise. We thought it would be best to show you a short video made by Orbis Software. Enjoy!
Enterprise architecture is a rigorous approach for describing the structure of an enterprise. A well-managed enterprise architecture results in an effective enterprise. Enterprise architecture is really 3 things. Firstly, it's a discipline. As a discipline, it's a way of thinking about the structure of an enterprise. An enterprise architect is a professional with know-how, skills, and aptitude in this discipline. Secondly, it's a process. There are processes for architecting an enterprise. They cover how architectures are created, how they evolve and change, and how they're managed. Finally, enterprise architecture is a set of work products, a set of models and representations that describe the structure of an enterprise. Enterprise architecture provides a specific approach for understanding and describing the structure of an enterprise in a rigorous way. This gives us a big picture view of the constraints and limitations imposed by the current structure of the enterprise. Architects can then show what options exist to change or make improvements by embedding better target structures. Enterprise architects produce pictures, diagrams, plans, and roadmaps that explain the current limitations and show how changes could make things better. They follow processes to take into account the opinions and views of all stakeholders and make the best of available resources and investments.
Alright, thank you Orbis Software. Is it just me or does everything sound smarter with a British accent? Okay, so what you're seeing here are different frameworks for EA. While the principles of EA are the same, the execution of EA in the public sector and private sector can differ. For example, the FDIC's framework is a little bit different than Intel's framework. If you look to the left, you'll see the FDIC's framework. It has business, which drives information, which prescribes data, supported by applications, which is then supported by the technical infrastructure. The top of the pyramid is business-driven, whereas the bottom is technology-driven. And along all levels, there is security and the e-government strategy. If you look to the right, you'll see a graphic for Intel's framework. It has 4 different components. The first is methodology. The second is architecture deliverables. The third is the common toolset and repository. And the fourth is architectural governance. The federal government publishes detailed descriptions of their enterprise architecture frameworks, which are called FEAFs. And a representative example would be from the FDIC. It built its own EA framework on top of the FEA from 2002 to 2005, in an attempt to reduce costs, improve alignment, simplify the architecture, and increase business satisfaction. Similarly, the Intel Corporation, a large manufacturer of semiconductor chips, did the same thing over a 10-year period to create and adhere to what it calls the Intel Enterprise Architecture Framework. Necessary conditions. The necessary conditions that helped frame EA with the Department of HHS had many legislative drivers, such as the E-Government Act of 2002, Government Paperwork Elimination Act of 1998, Klinger-Cohen Act of 1996, and the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. HHS Strategic Goals. In addition to the legislative actions, the HHS Strategic Plan, as demonstrated by the infograph on the right from the HHS website, shows the relationship of where the HHS domain, scientific research, and the strategic goals for HHS fall into play. Goals focused on reducing excessive paperwork by digitizing records and turning the focus back to patient care are extremely important cornerstones of the HHS department. HHS Architecture. Within each layer of the HHS architecture, IR plays a specific role. keeping in mind that HHS is citizen-centered and business-driven, with services defined and delivered based on the needs of their consumers. IR roles. As HHS makes up over 300 different programs, the role of IR floats between the strategic and supportive roles. HHS is supportive in the overall health of consumers that make up the federal enterprise, but is strategic within each program, such as NIH, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, the National Cancer Institute, NCI, and others. Based on the needs of each program, the EA varies slightly with the strategic goals. The Information Resource Management Team objectives are to facilitate analysis and business process use, ensure security and privacy, and evaluate investments against requirements to compete and service needs.
Enterprise architecture is designed to build a broad-based platform from which smaller, more agile solutions may be built to fit business need. However, every organization faces challenges when implementing a large-scale platform, and these challenges are not exclusive to HHS. The main challenge that exists across all enterprises is the cost of the project versus the perceived or real gained worth. While there are metrics that can give tangible cost benefit for the project, like process efficiency or increased worker productivity, some costs or savings cannot be measured and rely on the intrinsic value of the improvement, such as employee happiness or retaining of knowledge. While the cost is a main driver for measurement, so too is planning a driver for success. Each phase of a plan requires a more in-depth focus in certain areas. However, organizations should be aware that too much time spent on a single area will be to the detriment of progress in others. These tricky areas deal with change management, business processes, and organizational structure. With every project, it is important to have senior-level manager inclusion. Not only do these persons have to be informed of the project, they must also support the direction that the project is taking. Without this fundamental piece, there will be little adoption from working groups who would benefit the most. Cooperation throughout the organization will ensure that every area of information flow is analyzed, processed, and refined to create the best enterprise architecture solution. When segments are not completely forthcoming, some information could remain siloed, which will impact the performance of that working group in the enterprise architecture framework. When designing an enterprise architecture platform, additional care needs to be focused on the organizational structure so that the enterprise architecture framework matches the business processes and synergy of the entire enterprise as well as down to singular working groups.
As is the case with any new methodology, there are benefits and risks that are associated with an enterprise trying to implement that effort in their existing process. For EA, the main benefits are it unifies the corporate decision making and really ties in well business and information resources objectives. It creates visibility into the use of the organization's information resources, ensures compliance with policies and processes and corporate procedures, and it also has specific benefits to the IT domain. Again, it bridges another gap between the strategic planning process and the decision to invest in IT infrastructure. It also allows for better use or utilization of IR resources, and that includes, of course, the application/software, people, data, and the hardware. And in the end, over time, as the enterprise matures in EA, it could result in the creation of a more scalable and agile IT/IR infrastructure. Conversely, there are some risks, because with change, you will have risk. And just highlighting a few of the risks, there aren't many, but in the initial implementation, you lose time. The time in having staff ramp up to adopt the new change and the learning curve is involved in that. It also may require, EA itself may require investment in business productivity tools that are specific to that domain. It also could derail or needlessly complicate existing processes, which is why, you have to be careful how you approach implementing EA, because not all processes really need it. As such, it could have a negative impact on smaller projects. Now, moving on to the criteria for EA. Essentially, this slide captures what elements have to be in place, and this is just a suggested, it's definitely not a comprehensive list, but essentially you need to have management buy-in and sponsorship. It would be best to conduct an EA feasibility study to ensure your readiness, establish channels through which to communicate the enterprise roadmap. Definitely you want to set clear metrics for the measurement of the EA progress, realistic and achievable adaptability of EA tasks, and you also want to ensure that you formulate a sound business aligned IR strategy. And in just looking at the workflow, this slide just gives you an overview of the end-to-end process of a generic model for EA, where you just start with your current state, you look at the action steps of what you need to get you there, and eventually you will end up achieving your desired goal. And in the next slide, you see a suggested workflow of how we layer EA on or over the HHS business strategy to adopt a security tool application. So where they are now is that they have fragmented security systems, IT staff and security personnel don't talk to each other, and there's also a gap between policy between the two organizations. And it would be suggested that they work towards aligning all of those IR components by using one platform, and eventually at the end of that process should, in maybe a year or two, should be able to stand up fully their desired security system.
All right. So just to recap for today, we've learned a lot about enterprise architecture. And we've talked a lot about enterprise architecture within the context of HHS. Well, we thought we'd leave you with this video. What does HHS want its employees to know about EA? Here's a short video about EA from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is one of the 11 divisions of HHS. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.
Enterprise architecture. What is it? Why should I use it? How can it help me? Enterprise architecture. It's resources to help you do your job. Knowledge from across CMS. Helpful people connecting you with other helpful people. Effective tools to produce concrete results. Documents that describe our work in a new way. Enterprise architecture. It's planning, visualizing, collaborating, bringing the right people together, opening dialogue, developing a common language, brainstorming, finding solutions, together. Enterprise architecture. It's good management practice, providing clear direction, freeing you to do what you do best. It's the process that weaves business and IT together. It's optimizing existing resources, making responsible IT investments. It's piecing together the different elements that make up the CMS enterprise. For more information, contact the Division of Enterprise Architecture at CMS Enterprise Architecture at cms.hhs.gov.